Hello everyone and welcome. This is Christine with Patter Crafts and I'm here today with a design team project for Scrapping for Less. Today I am making 6 cards out of collection 1 from the April 2020 Flavor of the Month card kit. I have already made 1 card out of this collection for the reveal, so I just approached it to see how many I could get, and it ends up being 6. So this piece of pattern paper, I'd used this circle piece on that reveal card. So instead of trimming it down and having some odd different pieces, I decided to make a shaker card. It's been quite a while since I've made a shaker card. So I went ahead, put the acetate on my front panel and put that aside. Now I want these clouds to show underneath, but I got a little happy with my trimmer and I trimmed the piece just a little too short, but that'll be okay. I tried to find another piece to kind of fill in that gap. That didn't work, so we're gonna go on to plan number C. We're gonna call it C because this is the third idea on how to kind of cover that area up. The first one would have been cut the piece the correct way, and the second was to find a piece to kind of fit over it. That didn't work, so we'll cover it up on the front. So right now I am adding 2 layers of foam tape to my front panel. So I just glued some acetate over the area that had the circle cut out, and now I'm just adding a ton of foam tape so that this piece is nice and secure when it's on the card base. Because the sequins I'm using are pretty big, the little tiny gaps between that little top mini piece isn't going to be an issue. When I am doing anything that has a rounded edge, whether it be a circle or an oval, I cut the strip small and then take off the backing because then it makes it a lot easier to maneuver into those circular or rounded areas. So once that's all done, I'm going to just go ahead and take all the backing off, and I'm going to dump my sequins on my card base where the window will be. I'm kind of spreading them out a little bit so that they don't bunch up. And then I'm just going to go ahead and place this front panel over the top. I'm trying to be really careful not to get any of the sequins underneath, and I'm also want to try to make sure it's centered on my card base. So you can see the little red area right there on the bottom, and we're going to cover it up with the sentiment, "You're amazing," and no one will ever know it was there. So I'm going to go ahead and add that there. I already have my 2 little superheroes stamped out, colored, and cut. And we'll just go ahead and add those to the front. Then I'm going to grab the enamel dots found in this collection and add 3 of them over there to the right, where there's just a little bit of empty space compared to the rest of the card. So I'm going to go ahead and add my white panel to the inside of the card, and I'm just using some scraps to sort of decorate the inside. So I'm just going to trim down 1 piece of scrap to fit that left area. And then I'm going to take this extra star that I had colored for my reveal card, and we're just going to add that right up in the corner and call that done. So that is the first card that I made. So we're going to go on and move on to number 2, just kind of getting an idea of what kind of papers I have and deciding how I want to cut those. So once I decide which papers I want to use, I'm going to go ahead and grab my dies, and we're going to cut out the pieces that I need. So I'm using a stitched rectangle die for the striped area. I went ahead and also did the red plain piece of paper the same way, and then I trimmed the striped paper at a diagonal, added some ribbon, and adhered that on. Then I've got this little Supergirl in the corner, and I thought it was just a lot of red. I wanted to put her on something a little bit more. I'm choosing this ombre polka dot paper, and then I'm going to take it to my die cutting machine with that same stitched rectangle die, so I have the stitching to match the left and bottom of that circle, because it's not going to be a full circle on the card, but I want it to match the stitching that the rest of the card outside has. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and adhere that piece on, and then we'll put the little Supergirl up on some foam tape. Add that to the card base. I do like to try to add my panel to the card base before I add things with foam tape, just because the foam tape can get in the way of adding the adhesive to the panel. So I am going ahead and using the sentiment from the stamp set, and it says, "Thanks for being a super host." Just stamp that down with some MFT Extreme Black Ink, using some Spectrum Noir glitter brush for that, and we're going to call this card done. So now we're going to go on to card number 3, and we're going to use the other piece of that striped pattern paper that I had. I don't have any other pieces that would fill in the other side fully, so what I've decided to do is use a pencil and trim out, or at least pencil out, the area that I need to add a little detail. I grabbed this red ink from, this is from Memento, and I used the star sentiment, or the star stamp from the stamp set, to add a bunch of stars. And the only thing I would do differently is use a different ink. The ink pretty much dries and it blended completely into the card, and even now that it's been sitting for a little bit, you can't see any of those stars. So while the idea was good and I liked it when all the ink was wet, I either should have done some clear embossing or used a darker red or some other darker color on there. I'm thinking next time I would probably do embossing, because while I liked my idea, it did not play out. It still looks fine. It just looks a little naked underneath him, as far as, you know, I feel like there should be something more there, and had those stars stayed on the paper, it would have probably looked better. So I'm going to go ahead and add my Superboy on with some foam adhesive, and then I'm adding some of the Spectrum Noir glitter brush to his cape, his gloves, and his boots. Once that's all set, I'm going to stamp the sentiment. I used a mini scallop circle die out of just cut some white cardstock. I'm using the "Thanks for being a super host" stamp, and it didn't stamp very well, so I just grabbed this black pen. This is just an ink, it's an Inkjoy gel pen, and just went over the letters that didn't stamp out very well. Popped that up with some foam tape, and then I'm adding 3 enamel dots to the sentiment. For the inside, I am grabbing just a white piece of cardstock that's been cut down to fit the inside of my cards, using this scrap yellow paper from a different card. This is kind of what was left over from the reveal card and the shaker card we just made. I stamped out "You're amazing," and we're going to go ahead and just put that on the inside, and when that's done, this card will be all set. So for the third card, I am just grabbing a couple of the longer scrap pieces that I have. I guess they really wouldn't be considered scrap because they're pretty big, but I thought it'd be fun to put this gray one here with a center in the center, kind of like beaming the gray rays out, and I thought that would be the better spot for that. And then I'm adding the red with the buildings to the right. I debated if I wanted to add something in the middle of those two patterns, but I do decide against that. But I do check out, like, do I want to use some pattern paper, a blue strip, a piece of ribbon, but I end up doing nothing. So I cut out a mini scallop circle die sized large enough to stamp our little Supergirl on. I tried to use a light colored yellow Copic marker to kind of just go around her. It was probably a little too dark, and if I did this cardigan, I would not choose to do that. Or maybe not over the whole white piece. I don't know. What do you think? So once that's all set, I have 3 more enamel dots found in this collection, and we will again add some sparkle brush and call this card all done. I don't do anything on the inside of this card. So now moving on to the next card, I do have like a ton of little scraps. So I decided I was going to just do some strips left, because like these strips were big enough to do other things with. They weren't thin enough to do what I'm about to do. So I decided I'm just going to cut them down smaller. We're going to have a white piece of cardstock. This was trimmed down with my stitched rectangle die, but that was just to make it more uniform in size, not so much for any other particular reason. So I have a bunch of these little strips done, and I'm just going to add adhesive to the whole white piece here. And I'm just going to add these strips. This is a really great way to finish off a bunch of scraps that you have that maybe aren't really big. You don't really know what to do with them. So I'm just kind of adding these all over in different little ways. It's also good if you have some little small ones, which the real tiny ones I did throw away as I needed them, like in my little paper bin, and I wasn't going to go dig through them, so I am just using some of the bigger strips that I have. If you're a person who likes to save all your little scraps, this is a great way to use them up. I also like doing this because trimming the white paper after to make those edges perfect, like this part here, is so satisfying to me. I love doing this part. I love watching all those little pieces fall, and then I love it when I'm all done and I turn it over, because I always think it looks so ugly when I'm putting all those little scraps on, but I always love it afterwards and I actually look at what it looks like. Now I am choosing to add the 2 pieces of ribbon to this end because a couple of my strips were not long enough to fill in that little upper corner, so I decided to hide that with the ribbon. I don't know if I would do that again. I think I would just try to find scraps that might be big enough, but it's kind of hard with this size and you're using 6x6 paper to find the perfect scrap to completely go across the entire piece when you're going diagonally. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that on my card base. I'm using again, another mini scallop circle die to add my Supergirl here, but I'm also adding the sentiment to the front. It says, "I still believe in heroes." And then once I have that stamped on, I just add her to the other side. And on the inside, I'm just going to add some of this really pretty, I love this star paper. So I'm just going to add a strip of that to the side and call this card done once I get that in. And of course, we're going to add some glitter brush because why not? Now we're going to go on to the last card. I have some pretty nice scraps here, so I'm just kind of trying to figure out what's the best way to put them on a card base. So I'm just bringing a card base in. adding a whole bunch of adhesive to the front, and we're gonna just stick these on. And kind of similar to the last card, I'm just gonna plop them on here, and then I'm going to take my scissors, turn the card base around, and trim off all of the extra little pieces that are hanging over the edges. I really liked the way this card came out, which was really funny because it's really just a bunch of leftover paper. So we're going to go ahead and trim that down. I am grabbing now an oval. I was going to do a circle, but my little Superboy doesn't fit on the circle. So we're grabbing a oval mini scalloped die, and we went ahead and stamped him. He fits perfectly in this die. And I colored him with some Copic markers, and we're going to pop him up right in the center. I, again, don't do anything on the inside of this card, but I do add some glitter brush to his cape, his gloves, and his boots. And that is the 6th card for today. So all I have left from this collection are the scraps you see here and the stamp set. I've used everything else, all the embellishments, the paper, which feels good to get that done. Thank you so very much for joining me today. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more and you're not already, hit that subscribe button. But until next time, have a great day. Bye.